I think we've been having some issues across the board, but I want you to see this quick clip, and this is called The Future of Work, and just watch it very carefully because we've truly entered a brave new world. So hopefully you can see it clearly, and we'll go ahead and I'll press play. Okay, so listen, there's a lot you probably saw in that video. You saw a driverless truck. You saw the robots opening doors and walking, robots that are performing surgeries. You see restaurants where there's not one human working, it's robotic. You know, these truly are the times of sci-fi fiction, but yet it's really not fiction, it's become reality. And I think a lot of people in education, we've entered a world where we came in, but things are shifting so fast. And I think as a system, especially now during a pandemic, this is the ideal time to have these tough conversations. What is our role headed forward in the 21st century, especially as we are now in a disruptive phase of the fourth industrial revolution? And frankly, some of this conversation is late. This should have been happening decades ago as we prepared for this day. But I will say this, we are living during one of the most extraordinary times in human history. We see all sorts of innovations, but also we see upheaval in our society today, as you are very well aware. When you think about the future, you know, honestly, it is arriving faster than ever before. And I think maybe for some of you, when you were kids and you would watch, you know, sci-fi movies, you're thinking, man, could that be possible? But what's happening right now in the area of artificial intelligence, in the area of innovation, I will say this, there's a disconnect between higher education and what's going on in the Google world, in the Amazon world. And we have got to have these conversations, because what is our role in all of this? Maybe we need to be the innovators that talk about what future is going to look like. And I would say this, community colleges now are more, I would say, even more relevant and more vital than they have ever been, especially at this time we're living in. So when you look at, the future and you think about the future of work, technology innovations have now outpaced humans' adaptability. We're moving very quickly. You can see in 1997, this chart, the rate of change and learning faster and governing smarter. If you see right where we're sitting here, we're at 2020. We have now outpaced the movement where technology is now moving faster than humans can even keep up with. This is the advent. We are in the fourth industrial revolution age. And so when you think about the timeline, the first industrial revolution was the 18th century. That was the mechanization through steam engines, which was pretty amazing in and of itself. Then you had the second industrial revolution, and that was the 19th to 20th centuries. That was your mass production through electric energy. And then you have the third industrial revolution, which is the late 20th century. That's when we began to see this onslaught of intelligent information, the computer internet age, right? But when you think about history of education, where does education sit in terms of our system today? The second industrial revolution really developed what we see today in education. The concept, and I know you're aware of this, the concept of from 9 to 10, we have math. From 10 to 11, we have reading. And by the way, I'm a licensed educator. I taught 5th grade. I have a certificate in K through 12, not just the fact that I also have a community college leadership background. But as an educator, I think about these things. And when you look at the history of education, you look at where we sit today, we still have this industrial model where things are compartmentalized. And when you think about life and the world, that's not how life functions. Things are interdisciplinary, but now we're moving even faster. And so now we've hit this fourth industrial revolution. And that's where this intelligent information technology, it's weaving itself within the big data, the Internet of Things. Give me a thumbs up on your chat board if you know what the Internet of Things are. It's the connection between one machine to the next. And we know what 5G, we hear about 5G. Well, 5G wireless, if you look at the news, it's pretty big news right now, and for good and bad reasons. The good reasons is that they're saying we have to have this 5G network in order to be advanced with the Internet of Things, in order to advance the cloud system, in order for us to have driverless cars. And so when you think about that, a lot of folks are like, great, this is an exciting new era. But then you've got the other side of it where you're reading in the news, people are destroying 5G boxes. Have you seen this in the news? Because a lot of them are looking at it saying, well, you know what, it's putting humans at risk because there's a health side of it. It's ultra radiation. So no matter where you stand, we have hit a phase of disruption, and you have people who are excited, you have people who are scared, and then there's just the absolute unknown. But where do we fit in all of this with this idea of artificial intelligence and big data? And that's what I want to talk with you about. So here's something I'll share with you, this chart here, which I think is very informative. And we're looking at 2025, and my goodness, folks, we're at 2020. But you know what they're saying? They're saying, imagine one day you get up, right? You're getting ready for work. You walk in your kitchen, everything's automated, your coffee's on the counter, the machine's pulled it out, you have a hot breakfast, you literally grab your stuff, you take your app off of whatever it is, if it is even a phone or maybe it's something connected elsewhere, and you request a car because you have to get to work. So guess what? A driverless car shows up at your door in your driveway, and all you do is get in. Maybe you didn't sleep well last night, you put your feet up and you sleep until you get to work. They're saying that could be something that's coming. I'm not sure how you feel about that. I'm not really thrilled about that. I like my independence. But these are things they're saying by 2025, believe it or not, are going to happen. 10% of people wearing clothes and reading glasses, it will all be connected to the internet. I'm sure you've seen Google Glasses. So when you think about putting on contact lenses and being able to blink, and I can look up anything up on Google, that's coming. 1 trillion sensors now connected to the internet by 2025. This is pretty intense, folks, when you think about the number of information that's going to be moving from point A to point B and back. And not only that, but the Internet of Things, where you have machines communicating to other machines that are more advanced than human thought. Then they're saying by 2025, we will have the first robotic pharmacist in the United States. the first 3D printed car in production, the first transplant of a 3D printed liver. So on the video, if you paid close attention, there was a 3D house. They're building things out of machines where you have jumbo jets that are 3D printed images. This is crazy, but it's here. You have driverless cars equaling 10% of all cars on the US roads. This is the prediction, but I'm hearing that they're even moving quicker than that. 90% of the population using smartphones. I think we're almost pretty much there right now. Globally, more trips and journeys via car sharing than in private cars. So I mentioned a driverless car picks you up from home to go to work. And then they're saying that by 2025, the first city with more than 50,000 people and no traffic lights, because everything will be done within this new world of artificial intelligence. So you might say, okay, Angela, this is scary, but what does this mean for me? Well, that's my question back to all of you. You're in higher education. What is the response? When we sit down, I've been doing orientation for the last 3 weeks. We sit down, we pull out the map, an academic map. We talk to students. Oh, what do you want to do? Okay, let's pick these classes. You're going to transfer, great. Here's my challenge to all of you. We're doing things according to an old system, but are we preparing students for the jobs of tomorrow? Because what they say is 50% of all jobs we are training for today will not be there. So this is pretty stark reality, and I think now is the time to have the conversations. So I'm not sure of all who's on this call right now, but I have a sense you were meant to be on this call, because I think it's going to start with conversations like these, with groups like this, where you're going to be the innovators that are going to come up with the answers for tomorrow. So that's my challenge, is by today, maybe we don't address everything, but if I have in some way planted a glimmer of hope in you, in your mind, in your heart, that you could be the change agent for tomorrow, that you're helping develop a model of education to help students think more innovatively, then I've done a great talk. So I want to share this. Social changes due to the fourth industrial revolution. They're talking about intellectualization, human machine. That is technology, including machine learning, deep learning, and big data that makes machines think like humans. We're pretty much there. This is a little scary for me because, you know, there's conversations, even Elon Musk talks about this. We have to be careful, because what if the machines, you know, they talk about taking over the world. I hate to think of things like that, but there's a fine line. I think for me, even morality wise, there's a fine line where we go with these things. But whether or not you agree with it, whether or not I agree with it, you have people out there daily working on these things that are going to change the scope of where we're headed. So we've got to have a response. Virtual reality. This is something that we're seeing now in the fourth industrial revolution. And part of that, you can see it a little bit highlighted, human experience and cognitive domain become blurred. And so we can't lose our humanness through this process. Obviously, all of us have our smartphones, don't we? And we get connected to it. I would probably venture to say most of you, when you get up, the first thing you do is probably grab your phone and you carry it with you throughout the day. We've kind of been patterned to do this. We've learned the behavior. Human things, hyperconnection, it's the transformation into hyperconnection society. This is the hyperconnection of the internet of everything. It's human to human interaction. It's human to thing interaction and thing to thing interaction. And they've actually done studies. I don't know if any of you have seen this, where they have now robots, artificial intelligence, that will pick up the call for restaurants. And you know what's amazing about it? When somebody calls to order, they can't tell the difference. They don't know if it's a human or not. So look, there's more moral issues that are attached to this, because this could be used for bad. It could also be used for good. When you think about, now let's advance a little bit further. We talked about 2025. Let's look 10 years, almost 10 years from now. By 2030, they say that new technologies will automate 60% of all jobs. Yes, this does destroy many jobs, but it also enables the creation of 2.4 new jobs for every job destroyed. So that's something for you to think about. The new jobs created require higher skills. So automation, it will impact every job category, from scientist to physician to lawyer to lower skilled jobs. So when you're counseling your students and you're talking about career pathways and meta majors, we had better have in this conversation the shift. We can't predict everything, but we can predict enough to at least teach the higher order thinking skills, right? So we know that now robots are doing surgeries. Imagine by 2030 where this is going to be. They're talking about growing livers, 3D imprinted livers that will be implanted into people. So when you think about a bank teller, you think about a tax, somebody that's doing an accountant. Are these positions going to be there? And if they're not, what will it look like, right? So these are things I want you to think about. But ultimately, the combination of big data and artificial intelligence, it will allow for production to be created better and faster than humans. So we as people have no idea how fast things are changing. And this is something we've got to get educated on. 85% of jobs by 2030, they're saying that the 85% of jobs in 2030 have not yet been invented today. 60% of jobs will be automated. What does this look like for you? So this is where we're going to get into a discussion here in a minute. But I want to share it briefly. Let's talk here. Community colleges. Now, let's talk. Where do you fit in all of this? Well, here's the scope. So I've talked about kind of the future of work. Briefly, again, this could be months-long seminar. So this little time we've got is not enough to really cover it. But when you think about the future of work, and you look back on the past and you talk about the industrial revolutions and what we've been through, now we're in the fourth, and how education's really built upon the second industrial revolution. Where are we at today? All right, so let's look at this. Community colleges and the American dream. The American dream, you see this quote here, it's not about having stuff, it's about having opportunity. Most people would say it's the opportunity. Well, 1947, Truman Commission on Higher Education, if you look back at history, this is really where the concept of community colleges was birthed, is during that World War II with the veterans coming back, right? But when you think about the Truman Commission, they said this: equal opportunity for all persons to the maximum of their individual abilities and without regard to economic status, race, creed, color, sex, national origin, or ancestry is a major goal of American democracy. Only an informed, thoughtful, tolerant people can develop and maintain a free society. So a lot of what we have built our system upon is this concept of the American dream. In fact, they say community colleges, it's really like the Ellis Island of higher education. We're getting people coming to us from all walks of life, from all demographics, socioeconomic status, with a dream in their heart. But some people say American dream, it's a dream because you're asleep to believe it. I don't know if I'm going to say that, but America's community colleges, we are clearly at a crossroads. What are we facing right now? Right now, look across the news, across the board, research-wise. There's a demographic shift from a majority to minority nation. You see a lot of Asians are moving in. They have immigrated to our country. Hispanic, you see a rise in number of the minority. It's a majority-minority shift. So we need to think about that. How are community colleges addressing this, right? And I know this is conversations you've had, but things are shifting, folks, and we have got to have solutions to meet the needs of our students coming in that may not feel like they belong. Academic underpreparedness is a major problem in our nation right now. The average college freshman has a 7th grade reading level and an 8th grade math skill level. That's a tragedy. Approximately 70% of community college freshmen, we know this, take a remedial class in math. Now I know Florida, we have done a mathematics pathways reform. There's been a lot of things controversial. I know here at our college, we had an entire week devoted to talking about math pathways and redesigning our system. And there are things that we can do that work. Poor completion and attainment rates. Nearly half of all community college students entering in the fall term drop out before the second term begins. AACC did a national report called Reclaiming the American Dream. I encourage you to look at it. I ended up working on a second book based upon just strictly that report. Walter Bumpus, who is the president of the American Association of Community Colleges, wrote the foreword to the work that I was very blessed to be a part of. But now they're on to a 2020 project called Unfinished Business. Do you know why it's unfinished business? Because the numbers have barely shifted. Now we see Latino populations where the retention's getting a little better. But I can tell you across the board between Black and white student achievement, it's not great. When you look at students of color, approximately 70% attending a community college drop out. This is unacceptable. If we were a business and we were the CEOs, we would be fired, right? Of those who remain, only 10 to 12% graduate. This is the stark reality of our college system in America. For white students attending a community college, did you know 44% of them live in poverty? Most people don't talk about it, but we have a great group of poor whites in our system. And of those, only 2 out of 10 graduate. How many of you knew this? So what does this mean for us? How do we reclaim this American dream? Well, I'm going to say this. Dr. Bumpus, in his report, when he put his report out, this is something that the results, and listen, they had people from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, you name it, all across the country that sat a committee and said, we've got to address this. And here was one of their findings. The community college landscape is littered with lost credits that do not add up to student success. Fewer than half of students who enter community colleges with the goal of earning a degree or certificate have attained that goal, transferred or to a baccalaureate institution, or are still enrolled 6 years later. The rates, unfortunately, are lower for Hispanic, Black, Native American, and low-income students. Completion rates for students of color in some groups, often those students facing the greatest challenges, are, and listen to this, disappointing in the extreme. Do you know what their recommendations were? Let's reset, let's redesign, and let's restart the system. Pretty much keep open access, and we better start thinking fresh. So I think that's a pretty firm recommendations. As a nation, the United States, which obviously for generations we have led the world in college degree completion, now ranks 16th in the world in completion rates for 25 to 34-year-olds. In terms of global competitiveness, it depends on a well-educated citizenry. We know this, but we find ourselves losing ground. Now, I will say this, not to sound depressing. What is our benefit as a nation? We have been the nation who innovates, the nation who creates. Are we losing those skills in our system, or do we have a plan to build that? Because whether or not a student is going to pass a high level score on an SAT does not indicate whether or not they're intelligent. We know this. You can test very poorly and be very smart. So we've got to really figure out who are the students we're serving. What is it that's keeping them held back? What are the barriers? And as an educator and somebody who's taught, even in the college classroom, if my students don't well, I don't look at them and say, you know what, it's their problem. I look at myself and say, what did I do wrong? What could I do differently? And I think that's what we have to ask ourselves. I'm going to say this, community colleges have a crucial role, you know this, to play in seizing this opportunity. If this nation can add 20 million post-secondary educated workers to its workforce over the next 10 years, then income inequality will decline substantially, reversing the decline of the middle class. This is a recent article that just came out. In a moment, I want to hear from you. Nearly half of indebted millennials say college wasn't worth it. Half. And the reason why is obvious. So you know what we're seeing, trends is a lot of high school students, Google, major companies, do you know what they're doing? They're taking students directly out of high school, training them on the spot, promising them jobs. And a lot of students are going, you know what, I don't know if college is worth it. So whether you agree with that or not, I think we can all say college is worth it if you know where you're headed, and that you know that when you graduate, you're going to find the opportunities, what you're building from that experience. But this is reality. When you look at education, 50% of youth around the world don't believe that a post-secondary education is going to help them get a job. 17 million Americans are out of work with a graduate level degree that are bartending, working at Walgreens, and they're disgruntled. So when I think about my job, and we're in orientation and we're advising students, are we advising students for the future? 40% of employers, I'm sure this does not surprise you, say that lack of skills are missing for even entry-level positions. And 72% of providers say they have the skills. So this is now, when you look at all the numbers, our most pressing social issue of this century, redefining opportunities and responsibilities for millions of people in a society where jobs are declining or they're being reinvented. So let's throw in there the coronavirus, right? Let's put the coronavirus into the midst of all these numbers. Here's an article that came out on March 24th, how the coronavirus is going to change education forever. Do you agree with that? Give me a thumbs up, or maybe in the chat box, I want to hear from you. Is it going to change education forever? So I'm going to stop there. Does anybody have thoughts about this? How has the coronavirus affected you, your institution, and how do you think it's going to impact education? Go ahead and feel free if you want to unmute and share your comments, or in the chat box. I would love to hear from you. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share?
I think it's prompted all the universities, colleges, even you go down to the secondary education, the high schools, and even all the way down into grade schools and middle schools to get into the electronic age. You know, people have a tendency not to do something until their feet are put in the fire.
Oh,
And this is the so-called fire that's been put under our feet to force us to change and get with the picture. And I mean, I'm from the older generation in this whole mix, and change is not the electronic change is not something that we readily adapt to, but it's something that if you don't, you're left out of the picture, and you'll be completely out of the picture before too long. I'm the coordinator for the construction trades programs here at South Florida State College. And it's one of those things that even in the trades programs, the electronic age is making an impact over how we get information, how we get blueprints, and how things are updated to make sure that the technology that we're dealing with is as much state of the art as possible. Because if you don't, you get in the field, even laying bricks, as we saw earlier, machines are doing it, doing roofings, framing up walls, even the guys that grease the wheels on our cars. My generation forgot those people. Yeah. And as a result, they pushed everybody to go to college, which was not always the right thing, because we still need people to grease wheels, to change tires. And that's not a demeaning profession. Those are necessary fields of employment. And it's something for people to be proud of when they do it.
Absolutely. Well, Fred, I have a sense you do a very good job of what you do. And I'm so happy you're on this call, because the work that you're doing in your field is critical. And I agree with you 100%. So I appreciate your feedback. Absolutely. Are there any other thoughts about the coronavirus? What has this done for, and as Fred said, you know, there's an old saying, change comes by crisis. And we are at a crisis, and every single one of us in this nation and in this state and globally have had to respond to a pandemic. I can say here at our college, we immediately, as soon as things shifted, right after spring break, we went right into a virtual platform. One of the things we did is we started live courses. Live stands for learning interactively in a virtual environment. So we had students who say, you know what, I don't do well with online. Then you have some who do, but fine. We ended up taking our faculty doing intensive training to show them how to utilize and access the resources. But the point is that we had to respond quickly, as all of you did. Any other feedback before I go to the next slide on how this pandemic has affected your institution, and do you think it's going to be a permanent shift? So I see a few of you in the chat box have put, you know, that COVID has shown that jobs ignored are in great demand. So true, so true. And the divide is increasing, yes. And I see Katie Goodman on. That's fantastic. All right. So with that, let's look at this next slide as I move forward. Hold on one moment. When you look at the next, this was in the papers recently, or I shouldn't say the papers, the internet. Why the coronavirus will kill 500 to 1,000 jobs. Not jobs, but colleges, which include how many jobs. When you think about what this is doing, a lot of colleges, as Fred said, they're not prepared. And so if we continue to do the things we've done because we've always done it, well, guess what? Colleges are going to lose the opportunity. Their doors will be shut. If your enrollment does not meet the requirement to pay for your college and for staff, then we will be out of business. This is very serious. Now is our time to not only be creative, but we have got to be informed. We have got to do our research, and we've got to have these tough conversations. So I'm going to say this. When you think about the trends you're seeing in education, does anybody want to share, or maybe in the chat box, what are some trends you're seeing right now happening within your own institution, or something you're predicting is going to take place? And if you want to go ahead and put it in the chat box, that's great too. Yeah, Marcia, you said you saw this article. Some of the small colleges will close. All people need to have a computer or more at home. So what have you all done for your students in terms of this crisis that you would say has been an effective practice? Does anybody have an effective practice in moving towards the virtual best practices, teaching and learning? Any best practices? We'll take a few more seconds if you want to share. I'm looking at my chat box. All right, well, as you're thinking about these things, Daniela says, COVID-19 has exposed long-standing inequities in educational access. Boy, that's really good. Trending now, workshops on how to ensure educational continuity for students. Absolutely. Equity is a big, big issue. When you think about access, this has really brought it to light. Excellent service when answering emails and calls. Bertha, thank you. Yeah, so that's something I'm going to
say, Dr. Long, that's what I was going to say quickly is, you know,
Yeah.
now there's definitely, which is great news to me, more emphasis on these career ready skills, essential skills, you know, whatever we're calling them, not
Right.
only getting their training, but, you know, also having good communication, good customer service, teamwork, all the NACE competencies. So that is good news to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Katie does really excellent work in terms of her trying to work with innovators in our community and in the state moving forward. So
upskilling too is good.
What was that?
Somebody said upskilling.
Yes. Upskilling, Daniela, absolutely. It's trending now. So look, these are conversations I know you're having. And if you've not been having them in depth, now's the time. We've got committees that are meeting over lots of different things, but this is so important that we're having these conversations. So I want to talk to you now about the leadership challenge of the 21st century. And this is where you come in. So I've talked briefly. And again, these conversations are not in an hour. But I wanted to give you food for thought to at least get the conversation going. But really my challenge is, where do you fit in this? You know, Fred, I don't know you. Maybe you're going to be a college president. You might. I don't know. I don't know who on this call is going to step into a role. And look, we don't have to have a title to lead. So it's not about a title. It's about what are you going to do to help deliver answers. So here's some lessons I want to share from disruptive innovation cycles. Institutions and leaders are mismatched to the issues and the needs of the time. A lot of us have expertise in areas, but our expertise, is it going to carry forward into the future? So here's the challenge. According to a recent report at Inside Higher Education, more than 40% of the current community college presidents may retire within the next 5 years. We need people to step up and step into those roles, but not just to step into it, but have the foresight to lead. That equates to the loss of more than 500 college presidents, leaving gaps in community college leadership that need to be filled by qualified individuals if these institutions are to continue to thrive at their current levels. Unfortunately, that may be easier said than done, given the dwindling numbers of individuals heading into training programs that properly groom them for leadership positions at local community colleges. So that's something. But here's one thing I'm going to say. To address the future, we must look at the past. I talked about the second industrial revolution. Give me a thumbs up if you've seen this book, The Saber-Tooth Curriculum by J. Abner Pettywell. Give me a thumbs up if you have seen this book. Some of you are nodding yay, no. Okay. Well, let me tell you, in a nutshell, here's a book. I'm sure none of you have free time, but if you want to have a book to read, it doesn't cost much. You can order it on Amazon. It was written in 1939 by a gentleman named J. Abner Pettywell. Isn't it interesting how history repeats itself? And so here's the sum of the story, but here's a lesson for us to learn. This story is a play. It's a play on words in a sense. Okay. It's a satire. There is a caveman community during the Ice Age. And the tribal leaders, they have developed an amazing curriculum to teach their children how to ice fish, so they know how to catch the fish when it's in the dead of absolute freezing cold. They've taught them how to chase away the saber-toothed tigers who are eating the little woolly mammoths that they hunt and kill, and how to club the little woolly mammoths, okay? So they've got this really intricate curriculum that they have down pat. Well, over time, the kids, they're learning, doing great. They go out to the lakes and the streams and they ice fish. You know, they're figuring the right techniques to capture the saber-toothed tigers so they don't kill off the prey and take their food supply. But what happens? The Ice Age, it hits, and guess what? The ice starts to melt. And so as things begin to shift and there's warming, the waters become muddy because the ice is now melted away. But you know what happens? The kids continue to be taught how to ice fish. They continue to be taught how to club the saber-toothed tigers and capture the little woolly mammoths. But what happens is the ice fish they can't catch because the water's too muddy and the ice fishing technique doesn't work. The little woolly mammoths run away and the saber-toothed tigers die off because their food supply is gone. So the tribal leaders one day got together because the children were not performing. And one of the leaders said to the other elder, why are we doing what we're doing? Because clearly something's mismatched. And do you know what the response was? The elder of the community, he said, well, my goodness, we do what we do because it's tradition. And you don't break tradition. So here's my challenge to you. Why do we do what we do in education, K through college? All right. And what must we redesign to effectively lead the colleges of tomorrow? So this is my homework for you. I want you to really think about this. Get the book, but I want you to start thinking, if you could redesign the system of higher education, what would it look like? So with that, we have to think about what will learning mean in the future and how will you in particular influence the education of tomorrow. I don't care what your title is. I don't care if you sit at a desk and maybe you report to somebody and you feel like day to day, sometimes your work may be menial. I don't care. You might be the person that has the common sense enough to have the business mindset to say, you know what? I have observed our system and this is something we could put into place that could actually transform why we do what we do. And listen, folks, sometimes you have to start fresh. And access was mentioned. I don't think we ever toss out open access, but we need to start thinking, why does it take 6 years for a student to get a 2-year degree? Because let's be real with each other. It takes 6 years on average for a student to get a 2-year degree. And then what? They've spent 6 years of their life. They're now in debt for what? So these are things I want you to think about. Please jot these things down because here are some things, principles I'm going to leave with you to think about at this moment. If you want to be the leader that's going to step up, and again, it only takes one person to change a system. It only takes one person to change a nation for good or bad. Don't underestimate your value and your worth. So my key principle one is number one. It's this: know your calling. What are your strengths? What do you value? What do you spend your time on? Usually the things we spend our time on the most is what we value. And sometimes we spend time on things that we don't value. And if we do, we need to rethink why we're doing it. But what are you spending your time on? What is your calling? If anything I could do today that I would say was successful, if I inspire any one of you to maybe say, you know what, I think I'm going to go on and get my doctorate in community college leadership, or I'm going to get my master's degree. Maybe that's not the answer. Maybe you work with a new business platform and you develop new partnerships that becomes the model to the country. I would love to see that happen from this conversation. One of the things that I'm going to encourage you to do is make a list of your strengths and your weaknesses. What are you good at? You're not good at everything. We're not jack of all trades. What are your weaknesses? These aren't particularly mine. It's an example, but some people are very creative. They're flexible. They're focused. They know how to take initiative. But when it comes to public speaking, or maybe their presentation skills, or maybe they can't take any form of constructive criticism, how do we take the talents that we all possess, work with each other, and let our own strengths and talents shine? So think about your role in all this conversation. What is it you're doing day to day in your job that you could take your strengths? And don't let anybody above you, I don't care who you report to, you need to find a way to be heard. And so that's one thing I encourage. That's principle one, is know your value, your calling, and your strengths. All right, so write that down. Key principle two, do your research. Okay, you need to do your research because we talk about the future of work. We talk about these things, but these are organizational strategies that they're saying we need to see in future leaders in community colleges. Do you understand the mission, vision, and goals of the community college? And what is your role doing to support that? You need to learn the culture of the institution to effectively perform your duties. And maybe we need to start rethinking our mission in terms of how we're servicing our students and access, as it was mentioned. Think about competencies for the first 3 years on a job. Do you know yourself as a leader and not just emulate others? It's so important that you have the strong morals, the ethics, the charisma to lead and not be afraid to take risks. In terms of competencies for people who have been there for 3 or more years, be authentic, develop your personal toolkit, and have courage, because a lot of these things, it takes courage to lead. And it's not easy, and people, they don't like change, you know? But what is it you can bring to your organization organizationally through a strategic model that you could ignite, I would say, passion on your campus to get a group together to begin having these hard conversations? Key principle 3, and I see in here, Marcia, you mentioned about soft skills. I'm going to get to that. You need to ask the right questions. All right. So here's some questions. If you could redesign the system of higher education, what would that look like? How can you assist your college in particular with redesigning the student experience? Think about innovative models that remove barriers, that close equity gaps, that address the future of work to advance student success. So I'm going to give an example of what we've done here at Tallahassee Community College. Last year, we sat down because we looked at the equity gaps between our Black and white students in terms of math and performance, and there was a gap. We have over 50%, 51% of our students are non-white. We actually, our college sits in the poorest zip code in the state of Florida, believe it or not, 32304. And so we had a very heart-to-heart conversation with our faculty and staff. It was a 2-day process, and you can ask Katie, I know she's on this call. And we sat down and we took a design thinking model, and we asked our faculty and our staff, if you could redesign the system of education that removes barriers here at TCC, what would that look like? Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is what developed from that. It was a prototype that we literally had teams of faculty and staff. We pulled in students later on to get their input as well. And they mapped out, they said, okay, these are the barriers we see in our campus. This is what's inhibiting students from being successful. Then we asked them to develop a list of strategies. They did that. We compiled all the work. I promise you, the room looked like a war board. For 2 weeks, we mapped out all of the strategies that aligned. We looked at all the barriers that were matched up. They were repeats. And this is what emerged from it, was a culture of care prototype. This was something agreed upon by the institution. CARE is an acronym that stands for Connections, Academics, Resources, and Engagement. And so what we said is we did our research. We said, okay, what are the drivers of student success? We based our model off of drivers of student success. We said, okay, how do we build connections through intentional, early, and embedded experiences? Because ultimately, I'm going to tell you, the research shows us there are 2 things that we know. Number 1, do students feel that they belong? If they don't, they probably are not going to stick around. Number 2, do they know how to navigate your system? Because we've got barriers in place, whether it's systemic, whether it's just the way it is. But depending if you're looking at poverty, you're looking at race, there are barriers where students come on campus, and do they feel like they belong? And do they know how to navigate the system? Go to your websites. Do you know how to navigate your system of where you work? People coming in that have no clue. We've got to start rethinking things. And that leads to academics. Are you offering clear academic maps and pathways? You know, does it tie to the future of work? Does it tie to the partnerships in your community? Do you have the right resources on campus to support student success? And are students engaged? Even now, we have virtual services. I know all of you do. How are you engaging your students during this pandemic? Because mental health is an issue. But our core priorities as an institution have been this: personalized learning, which I'm going to get into in a minute, academic excellence, student success. We want to close equity gaps and build the platform that increases economic and social mobility. So this plan that we put together, if this is something you want to learn more about, we are happy to share with you, but I'll tell you this, it takes buy-in. It's not always from the top down, although the top down endorses this, but it took people at the front lines to say, this is what we think needs to change. And that's where we built this model. And everything we've done in the last year has carried out this culture of care. And so that's a whole nother presentation in and of itself. Here's key principle 4, take risks and innovate. When you think about Amazon, okay, and you think about Amazon as a company, years ago, they would have said, oh, Amazon, but look at it today. It is a $355.9 billion company. Walmart has always been popular, Target, all these places, but you look at these companies. Let me show you this. I know it's not very clear, so I apologize. Sears is out of business. What do we learn from Amazon, right? What do we learn from companies that have learned to adapt to change and they've innovated? Sears was not willing to maybe go online to do online shopping as Amazon built the platform. But what have we learned? When you think about Starbucks, Amazon, and Chick-fil-A, What do you think about? It's a personalized process. So here's a key I'm going to say in terms of talking about education today and how can we close equity gaps? How do we think about the future? When you go to Amazon or your phone and you've got the app and you shop, it is not built upon departments. Like it doesn't sort according to departments like, oh, well, yes, you can click on clothing and so forth. But what does it do? It gives you recommendations. You are the center of the service, so you put in what you want to find out and they'll do a search. Why aren't we doing that in education? You think about Starbucks, you go in, what is your name? Chick-fil-A, how may I help you? It's my pleasure. It is a business model. There's a lot I think we can learn in higher education from a business model. So that's key principle number 5 is personalize the student learning. When you think about the future of education, the problem is never how to get new innovative thoughts into your mind, but how to get the old ones out. So look at the bottom of this page. I know I'm running out of time, but essentially it's IQ plus EQ plus MQ plus GQ plus DQ, not Dairy Queen, plus PQ and CQ. What is that? Creativity plus communication plus critical thinking, collaboration, character, citizenship, and copyright your work. That is the key to building synergy in your campus and cultivating that creative talent. The elements of a learning ecosystem, when you're thinking about the 4th Industrial Revolution, I want you to look at this. This is where we need to be. Learning transcends time and place. So we are able to meet the needs of our students. What are we doing like Amazon to deliver services? I'm not talking about individualized learning. We don't have time for that, but you can personalize learning through a process using artificial intelligence. How do we transcend learning through time and place? How do we customize curriculum that considers individual learning processes, right? How do we use various materials for learning? There's a lot of resources, but the problem is we're not doing enough of our own research to teach our faculty how to use these resources. So I can share these slides. I know I'm running out of time, but really we have to start thinking multidimensionally. We have to encourage our students. So this goes now to soft skills. Marcia had mentioned in the chat, we talk about the future of work. We know if 60% of jobs are not that we're training for will not be there, they're gonna be reinvented. What are the 2 skills we need to start teaching, okay? What are the 2 skills we need to start teaching? Well, let me tell you, LinkedIn, they did a national survey. In the chat box, I want to know if any of you have the answer to that. What were the top 2 skills that LinkedIn said employers are looking for in today's graduates? I want to see in the chat box, top 2 skills that were listed as the number 2. All right, Katie Goodman says communication, critical thinking. Mildred, critical thinking. All right, well, ding, 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 critical thinking. Actually, it was creative thinking was number 1, which goes along with the critical thinking. What is number 2? Does anybody know what is number 2? We see soft skills, customer service, writing. All right, you guys are very good. Soft skills, it is teamwork. Teamwork, which embeds all of that soft skills piece. That was number 2. If you can teach your students to be creative, to have critical thinking skills, and to develop their team player skills, the soft skills, then guess what? If jobs aren't there that we're training for today, they will learn to adapt. So these are the trends we're seeing now in terms of the 4th Industrial Revolution era. Mobile learning oriented, where we heard of flip learning. We know flip learning, you're switching the time so that they do the work at home, and then when they're in class, they're having time to do group discussion. Smart learning, collaborative learning, hybrid learning, social learning, all of these different types of learning. And you can look more on each of these. There's research on each of them. It's a mixed teaching and learning process. It's not a lecture driven. I know I'm lecturing all of you for this Zoom meeting, but it's where you are giving your students an opportunity to be a part of apprenticeships, internships. They're key to learning. You're giving them opportunity to use problem-based learning to address the issues in society and come up with patents and solutions. You're giving them opportunities to create and innovate. And that is the trend of this era of what we have got to be doing if our students are going to succeed. So that leads me to principle number 6, build the right partnerships. Fred, I know this is for you, and I know you're doing it in business and industry. That is key. I mentioned employers are looking for creativity and teamwork, right? You can't know everything, but if you find the right leaders in business and industry, you have to work together. So what are you doing to partner with the people in not just the community, But with Amazon, with Google, are you sitting down with these conversations with some of these leaders that are developing the industries of tomorrow to say, okay, what are your recommendations for us? That is key, that we don't silo ourselves from what's happening in the scientific world. And so there's much more I could talk about that, but I can tell you right now, if you've heard of Peter, I can't say his name well, Diamandis, he wrote a book on The Future is Faster Than You Think. I know he came here and spoke. But when you look at Elon Musk and Neuralink, some of the scary stuff, they literally have embedded, it's a web in the brain that hooks up to the internet. And this is what people are developing, whether we agree with it or not. What are we doing to develop our creativity with our students? Because guess what? Maybe there's not a job you're training them for, but maybe there's a job they're going to design for themselves, right? And so that's what we have to be doing. So I close with this. What is your place and purpose in all of this? So here, to close, here are 5 qualities, and this is according to Aspen, of effective community college leaders, right? The Aspen Institute and Achieving the Dream have identified these 5 qualities of effective community college leaders, which includes 1, and think about where you stand, deep commitment to student access and success. I think clearly if you got on this call, you have some sort of passion to want to learn more, to be a part of a conversation, because you could have said, no, I don't care, I don't want to talk about this, right? So are you deeply committed? Number 2, are you willing to take significant risk to ensure that students have a place in tomorrow? Because I think a lot of people are uncertain about the future, and guess what? Things will get better. We will get through this time together, but we have to have the hard conversations and not worry about what others think. Do you have the ability to create long-lasting change within the community college system? And I'm gonna say to each of you, I don't know you, but you do have the ability. Do not underestimate where you stand, who you are, because of your title, because of your job. I don't care. Start doing the research, get informed, because you don't need a title to lead. And 4 and 5, you need to have a strong strategic vision for your college. Who on your campus can you partner with to begin this process if you've not already begun it? And do you have the ability to work with folks who can help you raise and allocate resources to promote student success? So this is done on their research, Aspen Institute. And I leave with this question: is now your season to upskill, and is now your season to pursue a doctorate in community college leadership? You just might, we just might, Marcia, have on this call 5 future presidents that are going to lead colleges.
I think so.
All right, so I'm going to close if I have time. I want to share this quick video. It's called Be the Change, and let me see if I can open it. If I can't, I can certainly send the link out. So hold on one moment. I may not be able to open it. It looks like I'm not able to open it, but I will leave you with this. You each have an opportunity to be the change in your campuses, and I'll send this video out. But please, if you wake up in the middle of the night and an idea comes to you, write it down. Take the initiative to be a voice for tomorrow, because I believe every single one of us have opportunity to be that change. And so I just wish you all the absolute best. I know that this conversation, it takes more than an hour to cover these topics, but I hope it's given you some food for thought. And just know you are worth it. You have the talent, you have the drive. And so I'm gonna be looking for your names down the road in the future to say, hey, look, that person is now sitting in this place of leadership. So with that, I just wanna thank all of you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity and the time to talk with you today.
Thank you, Angela. I'm sitting here, as usual, speechless, thinking about all of the information that you just imparted. And you are so right. Every single person has the ability to lead. It's just a matter of us stepping up, using our voice in whichever way that we both feel comfortable, and allowing ourselves to stretch a little bit. But stepping up, stepping out, and being a change agent. So kudos to everyone who heard the calling and feels like you're ready to take on these very interesting times that we're living in. If at no other time than now, I think space has been created for all of us to do things differently. and to take advantage of this moment. So again, thank you, Angela. Sharon, are you still out there? Would you like to close us out with a word from CPEC?
Hello, yes, I'm still here. You know, I always have to listen to Miss Angela. And I just want to say thank you again for a wonderful presentation. Marsha, we may have to do a third-part series somewhere along the line. But I want to thank everyone who did join in on the call, because I know that those of you who did join in, you all are really care about your students, as we all do. And right now it is a hard time that we are dealing with, but we can make it happen. We can be the change agents that I know that we can be. CPEC is out there to help you all. We believe in doing professional development for all our members. So if you all have any ideas of other subjects that you would like for us to put on, we will. I'm in the process of getting in contact with other people. So look for some further webinars down the line. And again, congratulations to Marsha. She has a lot of stuff, big stuff that has happened to her. And for those of you, if you want to get in contact with me, I'll put my email in the chat box, but it is walkers@tcc.fl.edu. And again, I want to say thank you, and please be safe and have a great day.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Box if you want to reach out, I'm happy to talk to you further. So thank you, Marsha. Sharon, you're beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Everybody have a great day.
Blessings. God's blessings. Bye.
Bye-bye.